Hello there, and welcome back to the Science Sleepy Minds. The room is quiet except for the soft hum of your bedside fan. Outside, the night wraps around your windows like a velvet curtain. You're warm under your blanket, mind still buzzing with the last emails you swore you'd ignore after dinner. And then, like always, you end up here, drifting into something a little more curious than scrolling through news or watching reruns. Tonight we're starting small, or rather, spiraled. You glance into your cereal bowl one sleepy morning, spoon hovering in autopilot, and you notice something odd. The flakes aren't just floating. They're clustering, spiraling, forming neat little patterns like they're auditioning for synchronized swimming. Coincidence? Probably, but not entirely. Because that exact spiral, tight in the middle, expanding outward, is everywhere once you know how to look. It's hiding in pine cones, in your ear canal, in sunflower seeds, hurricanes, galaxies, and yes, even in your slightly soggy bran flakes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, leave a comment with your current location and the local time. Let's see who's falling asleep where tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You sit back, eyes softening, and picture a sunflower, its center swirling with seeds arranged so perfectly, you half expect it to be computer-generated. But this isn't CGI. This is the Fibonacci sequence in full bloom. Each seed placed at an angle of approximately 137.5 degrees from the last, a number called the golden angle. And it's not just pretty, it's practical. That angle lets the seeds pack tightly without crowding. Here's the weird part. No one taught the sunflower to do this. It doesn't count. It doesn't have a sketchpad. But somehow it obeys this mathematical code that's been whispering through nature for eons. Fibonacci numbers 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on, where each number is the sum of the two before it. These numbers pop up all over nature. You see them in the number of petals on a daisy, the way tree branches split, the curve of a nautilus shell, even in the way rabbits might reproduce, if they were, say, immortal and mathematically inclined. Historians still argue whether Fibonacci himself discovered this or just made it trendy in medieval Europe. The sequence existed in Indian mathematics centuries earlier, after all. But his 1202 book, Liber Abaci, helped spark a mathematical renaissance, which is impressive, considering it was mostly a manual on currency conversion and how to divide loaves of bread without starting a fist fight. Still, nature didn't wait for math textbooks to start spiraling. Shells have been growing logarithmic spirals for millions of years. You pick up a conch and run your finger along its curve. It widens as it grows but never changes shape. That's key. It expands without distorting, like zooming into a fractal or watching someone age in a time lapse, always growing, always self-similar. You walk past a pinecone. Look closer. Those little bracts are arranged in overlapping spirals, some clockwise, some counterclockwise. If you count them, they'll almost always match Fibonacci numbers. You can test it next time you're bored in a forest. One spiral might have 8 rows, another 13, or 21, like nature's way of nudging you, saying, "Hey, this isn't random." And randomness is exactly what it's not. Even your own fingerprints, those whorls and loops and arches, aren't just for police records or phone unlocking. Their patterns form during fetal development as a result of pressure in the womb, but the spiral forms. They appear across biology, from storms to galaxies, from your fingertips to your breakfast flakes. Spirals are efficient. That's the quiet truth behind their popularity. They allow growth without limits. They optimize space. They direct flows of air, of water, of blood. Think about your heart. It's a muscular pump that spirals blood through a network of tubes. It even twists slightly when it beats, because of course it does. Even our toilets flush in spirals. Though no, sorry, the direction doesn't reverse depending on which hemisphere you're in. That's an internet myth. The Coriolis effect does affect large-scale systems like hurricanes, but your sink doesn't care if you live in Peru or Portland. The spiral in your drain is simply a matter of plumbing and angles, not global physics. Still, you can't help but wonder, is there intention behind these patterns? Or are they just inevitable results of physical laws? Some philosophers say that beauty and symmetry in nature are emergent, not designed, like frost crystals or smoke rings. No one's choreographing the steps, but they still dance. Others argue there's an embedded code, like a language nature speaks quietly. A hidden algorithm etched into biology, physics, even chemistry. Something that tells a galaxy how to spiral and a sunflower where to grow its next seed. Not divine, necessarily, just elegantly mathematical. One fringe theory claims spiral geometry might be the foundation of ancient architecture. Stone circles, pyramids, even cathedrals allegedly reflect golden ratios and Fibonacci spirals in their proportions. Whether that's intentional or the result of obsessive historians measuring with flexible rulers, well, that's up for debate. But it's a lovely idea, isn't it? That even our oldest buildings were trying to echo something much older, something encoded in snails and seeds. You lie back now, visualizing all those spirals curling gently through the universe. The curl of a fern before it opens. The Milky Way reaching its bright arms across light years of space. The swirl of milk in your tea, all echoing the same silent motif. Your brain tries to latch onto it, tries to decipher the rules, but the closer you look, the more abstract it becomes. A golden angle here, a sequence there, all converging and then slipping just out of reach. But maybe that's the point. Nature's code isn't meant to be shouted. It's meant to be noticed quietly, like a whisper on the edge of sleep. And you're already halfway there. You blink slowly, the image of spirals still drifting behind your eyelids, when a gentle buzz hums nearby, a lazy summer bee hovering around a half-empty glass of lemonade. You watch it land on a table and begin its strange, twitchy little shuffle. That dance, it's not just for fun. It's a whole GPS transmission, but you'll get to that in a minute. First, you lean in to look closer, not at the bee, but at its home. A honeycomb. Dozens of golden hexagons, each one so perfect you'd swear they were machine-made. Not a circle, not a square, a hexagon. And that choice isn't really a choice at all. You've just stumbled into one of the most efficient structural designs in nature, the hexagonal grid. Bees, as it turns out, are accidental mathematicians. The hexagon is the shape that uses the least amount of wax to store the most amount of honey without wasting space. No gaps, no overlaps, like nature's version of a Tetris master. Historians still argue whether the Greeks or Persians first noticed this geometry. But it wasn't until the 18th century that a Scottish mathematician, Thomas Hales, proposed the honeycomb conjecture, that hexagons are the most efficient way to divide a surface into equal areas with the least total perimeter. It wasn't just a cute idea, it was true. And bees were doing it long before humans worked out the math. Here, where it gets weirder, bees don't build perfect hexagons on purpose. They just make wax cells in a circle, pack them tightly, and the heat of their bodies softens the wax so that surface tension pulls the cells into a shared border, 6 sides. Just like bubbles forming a honeycomb in your sink when you wash the dishes. No calculus required, just physics doing its quiet thing. But just to keep you on your toes, not all bees follow the rules. Some tropical bees build bizarre, spiraling combs. Others form vertical slabs or staggered nests. And in certain environments, hexagons break down entirely. Which means, yes, the hexagon is great, but not sacred. Still, you drift closer to this pattern. Imagine crawling along the edge of a wax cell, peeking down into its geometric hollow. One side leads to 6 neighbors, and those lead to 6 more. A fractal hive of angles and symmetry, all vibrating softly with the hum of 10,000 tiny wings. And that dance you saw earlier, it's called a waggle dance, part choreography, part map. The bee shakes her behind at a particular angle and speed to show her sisters where nectar lies. Fly toward the sun, then turn left at the weird oak tree, all delivered in abstract bee-zumba. Fringe theory time. Some researchers have speculated that this waggle dance might contain even more information than we currently understand. Maybe even something akin to syntax, a simple grammar of direction and reward. A few scholars argue we've only cracked the basics, like deciphering a Morse code without realizing it's part of a language. No one agrees on how deep the code runs, but it's definitely a code. And the code doesn't stop with honeybees. Look at a turtle's shell, a wasp's nest, the eyes of a dragonfly. Hexagons again, over and over. Something in nature loves this six-sided shape. Even snowflakes, 6 sides, but we'll get there soon enough. For now, you're still lying half awake, imagining bees drawing invisible blueprints in midair. Not because they understand geometry in the human sense, but because geometry is baked into the rules of the world, into how forces interact, how things connect. In a way, the bee is just following tension, not tension like office drama tension. We're talking literal physical tension, pressure, angles, materials, energy. And somehow, all those invisible factors push the bee toward optimal efficiency. Wax becomes walls, angles align, and a new generation of bees is raised in the glow of a hexagonal nursery. Here's a historical nugget for you. The ancient Romans loved bees. They admired their discipline, their order, their architectural genius. Pliny the Elder wrote about the marvel of the hive, how bees seemed to function as one mind. They couldn't explain the hexagons, of course, but they knew something clever was going on. And even today, we keep borrowing the idea. Beehive shelves, hexagonal tiles, carbon nanotubes, and even satellite designs use this geometry. It's lightweight, strong, and scalable. From kitchen backsplashes to aerospace engineering, we've quietly accepted that the bees got it right first. Meanwhile, you're still half dreaming of that hive, listening to the soft buzz, the rhythmic tap of bees landing and lifting, the sticky gold scent of wax and nectar and summer sun. You picture the entire structure breathing as if it were alive, which in a way it is. The hive isn't just a building, it's an organism, a superorganism. Tens of thousands of tiny individuals working together like a single being, communicating through scent, touch, sound, and dance. There's a strange comfort in that, in the idea that intelligence doesn't always come from a single brain, but sometimes from a network of small, simple parts acting in harmony. Like neurons firing, like ants in a colony, like you maybe, part of a bigger pattern you can't quite see. A fringe ecological theory even proposes that forests, oceans, or even Earth itself might behave like giant superorganisms, self-regulating, feedback-driven. Each tree, each bee, each cloud playing its part in the whole. You're not sure what to think about that yet, but the thought lingers, soft and sticky like honey on your fingers. You open your eyes briefly, the fan hums on, the room glows faintly blue from the window. Somewhere outside, a real bee is probably dozing under a leaf. And inside your brain, little sparks firing, building a pattern, a hexagonal lattice of thought. Nature doesn't make things up as it goes. It follows rules, but those rules aren't rigid. They bend, shift, adapt, like bees do, like thoughts do, like dreams do. And as you slide deeper towards sleep, that honeycomb floats with you, a hexagonal map of order, rhythm, and quiet, buzzing purpose. You stir slightly as a breeze slips through the screen, and you catch the scent of something earthy, like moss after rain or damp bark in the early morning. And just like that, you're not in bed anymore. You're in a forest. Everything's green. Not just green, but 1,000 shades of it. Deep emerald in the shadows, lime where the sun streaks through leaves, silvery where dew still clings to ferns. You step onto the trail, but you're not really walking. You're floating forward, slow and weightless, as if the forest is pulling you gently inward. And then it starts. You notice a tree, then another, and another. Their branches don't just spread randomly, they fork in patterns, always splitting at roughly the same angles as if following rules. You look closer at a fern, one of those lacy, spiral ones. The small leaflets look just like the larger frond they grow from. In fact, every part of it looks like a miniature version of the whole. And boom, you've just walked straight into fractal country. Fractals are shapes that repeat themselves at different scales. Zoom in and the pattern doesn't change. Zoom in more, still the same. Mathematicians call this self-similarity, but you might just call it spooky. The forest is full of these things: trees, roots, lightning, river systems, blood vessels. Even your lungs are fractals, each bronchial tube splitting like tree limbs until it reaches the alveoli where breath meets blood. Historically, we didn't even have the language for fractals until the 1970s, when Benoit Mandelbrot gave them their name. He studied messy, broken shapes that didn't fit neatly into classical geometry: clouds, coastlines, crumpled paper. Stuff Euclid would have scoffed at. But Mandelbrot saw order in the chaos. He realized that nature doesn't care about straight lines. It repeats and folds and spirals, always building complexity from simplicity. Take a tree, it's not drawing blueprints. Each branch follows simple growth rules. Grow until there's too much shade. Bend toward the light, split when you're strong enough. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures understood fractals in a formal sense, but some point to African architecture, especially in Mali, where entire villages were built with fractal layouts, small buildings echoing the shape of larger compounds. A house shaped like a room. A village shaped like a house. Recursive design before recursive was even a thing. But back to your forest. You lean closer to a single leaf. Its veins branch like rivers, and those rivers have tributaries, and those tributaries have their own. And just like that, you're lost inside a botanical labyrinth, all of it following some invisible code. You could call it a biological algorithm, simple instructions, repeated over and over until something magnificent appears. Now here's the quirky part. Even snowflakes and broccoli follow fractal rules. Romanesco broccoli, with its lime green spirals, is practically nature's pop art nod to math nerds. You could pluck off a floret and zoom in a dozen times, and it'd still look like the whole, like the universe's screensaver. You take a few more steps, and suddenly the forest opens. A valley of lightning-struck trees lies ahead, some with branches scorched clean off. And you notice something strange in the patterns the lightning made on their trunks, those jagged, branch-like burns called Lichtenberg figures. They mirror the trees they burned. Lightning, it seems, shares the same geometry as the forest it destroys. The same branching shapes can be seen in neural networks in your brain, in the electric veins of cities seen from space, in the delicate ice on your window during a frosty morning. You lie down now, forest floor cool beneath your back. Above you, the canopy fans out, another fractal, leaves against sky, twigs against branches, like nature drawing itself again and again. And here's something delightful. Fractals aren't just beautiful, they're efficient. A tree designed like a fractal maximizes exposure to light. Lungs shaped as fractals maximize oxygen intake. A river system distributes water efficiently across a landscape. Nature doesn't waste effort. It designs through repetition. There's a fringe theory, not widely accepted but fun to imagine, that the entire universe might be a fractal. Galaxies containing smaller galaxies. Matter organizing recursively from the quantum to the cosmic, like some infinite, echoing Russian nesting doll. Of course, cosmologists argue fiercely about this. Some say the large-scale structure of the universe is random. Others insist it follows a pattern. As of now, unproven, but tantalizing. You tilt your head, imagining your own thoughts branching like dendrites, curling around ideas like tree limbs around sunlight. The mind itself, it seems, might be a fractal. Patterns folding into patterns, memories spiraling into dreams. Even chaos, which we like to think of as disorder, is full of fractals. That's right, chaos theory, with its hurricanes and stock market crashes, is built on self-similarity. One famous fractal, the Mandelbrot set, is a mathematical shape so complex you can zoom into it forever and never see the same pattern twice. And yet, it still contains copies of itself. You remember that scene in a movie where the camera zooms into someone's eye, and then into the neurons, and then further into atoms. And somewhere in there is a galaxy that mirrors the whole thing. A visual cliché, sure, but rooted in something real. Because in nature, small things often mirror big ones, and sometimes the pattern is the message. You breathe in the scent of moss, the soft crackle of distant leaves. The fractals are everywhere now, in the bark beside your head, in the way your fingers curl, in the constellations your brain paints onto the canopy. And you realize there's comfort in the repetition, in the familiarity of it. You're not lost, you're nested. A single node in an infinite branching system that somehow holds itself together, growing, dividing, spiraling forward. And just like you, a chill runs down your arm and you curl a little deeper under the blanket as if your body knows what's coming. Not fear exactly, just that sharp, crystalline silence that always arrives with snow. You're not in the forest anymore. Now you're standing beneath a dull gray sky, surrounded by stillness. And the air, it feels like it's holding its breath. A single snowflake drifts down, landing on your coat sleeve. You lean closer. It's small, almost invisible, but there it is. A perfect six-pointed star, delicate and symmetrical as if sketched by a watchmaker on break. It's a fleeting miracle, melting even as you stare. But in that tiny, icy moment, you see something extraordinary. Nature's obsession with symmetry. Snowflakes form in hexagons, always. No matter where on Earth they fall, or how chaotic the weather is, or how cranky the cloud, 6 sides. That's because water molecules bond at 120-degree angles when they freeze, and that math forces the crystal into a 6-pointed shape. Physics, chemistry, geometry, all playing quietly behind the scenes like a backstage tech crew running a winter opera. And while all snowflakes are hexagonal, no two are exactly alike. That's not just poetic, it's physics again. As each flake tumbles through the cloud, it spins and drifts and dodges microcurrents, collecting water vapor at a unique rate. Each branching arm grows based on its specific journey: temperature, humidity, airflow. Identical in structure but shaped by experience. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? There's even a name for the study of snowflake patterns: dendritic growth. Dendrites are branching shapes, much like what you just saw in the forest, fractal-like structures with symmetry. It turns out that snow, like trees and lightning, follows the same principles. Nature recycles its favorite tricks. Historically, humans have been fascinated by snowflakes for centuries. The first known snowflake sketches were made by a Danish bishop named Olaus Magnus in 1555. But the real breakthrough came from a Vermont farmer named Wilson Bentley in the 1880s. Using a microscope and a camera, he captured over 5,000 snowflakes on film and gave the world the first visual proof that no two are alike. They called him Snowflake Bentley, and he became the world's first snowflake influencer, long before Instagram. Still, historians argue whether Bentley truly understood what he was documenting. Some say he romanticized it too much, focusing on the pretty ones and ignoring the clumps and shattered crystals. But even if he was picky, he gave us a glimpse into the tiny geometries floating all around us, unseen. Now here's your fringe fact. In 2020, A research team at the University of Utah managed to simulate the precise atomic conditions that create snowflake patterns down to the molecular level. They built a digital snowflake lab. And guess what? Even with total control, they still couldn't produce two identical flakes. The chaos is built in. Symmetry, then, is never perfect. It's aspirational. Snowflakes try to be balanced, but real-world physics gets messy. And that brings you to a quiet realization. Symmetry isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. A snowflake is built to fail gracefully. Each of its 6 arms grows in sync, but independently. If one gets damaged or distorted, the others continue on, adapting without breaking the pattern entirely. Kind of like you. You breathe out and the puff of vapor spirals upward, lost in the still air. Around you, the snow begins to fall in earnest, soft, slow, and heavy. You open your hand and another flake lands on your palm. This one's simpler, a stubby star, maybe still growing when it fell. That's the other truth about snowflakes. They're never finished. They stop forming the second they hit warmer air. Each one is a frozen work in progress. A mid-sentence thought that never got to finish the paragraph. And you think of all the unfinished things in your life. Projects, plans, conversations. None of them ruined, just paused, like snowflakes in flight, shaped by currents you can't control. You walk a little further now, boots crunching softly. And everywhere around you, the landscape transforms into a field of microsymmetries. Frost on windows, ice crystals on tree limbs, each one expressing nature's quiet addiction to patterns. But not just visual patterns, mathematical ones. Take a snowflake's branching arms. They grow in a radial fashion, often based on harmonic frequencies. There's even a theory that snowflakes obey a kind of frozen music, vibrations encoded into shape. That might be poetic nonsense, or it might be something science hasn't cracked yet. Physicists have also noted that snowflakes fall slower than they should. Their broad, lacy structure creates drag that defies gravity just a little longer. It's the same principle that gives feathers and paper their floatiness. And it's why watching snow fall can make time feel syrupy and slow, like the world pressing snooze on itself. You stop just for a moment. You let it fall. You let it settle. Let the chaos of the day shrink down to a 6-pointed crystal, melting quietly on your sleeve. Somewhere in the swirling storm of your mind, tasks, anxieties, deadlines, you start to sense symmetry too. A quiet rebalancing. One side of your brain calming the other. A little dendritic branching of peace. And just when you think the snow is done surprising you, there it is again. That hexagon. Popping up not just in snowflakes but in basalt rock formations, insect eyes, soap bubbles under pressure. Over and over across systems and scales, nature returns to the 6. Why 6? Because it tessellates. It fills space efficiently. And perhaps in the deepest code of the universe, efficiency is elegance. Not minimalism, not harshness, just balance. Like a snowflake spinning lazily to earth. You breathe slower now, letting the patterns settle. Symmetry, spirals, branching arms, all blending softly, like snow falling into snow. No two moments are the same, but the rhythm, that stays. And somewhere quietly, a snowflake finishes growing and falls. You barely notice the shift, but suddenly the snowy hush has given way to something else. You're not cold anymore. In fact, you feel warmer now, the air thicker, the light dim and greenish, filtered through broad leaves that sway just slightly, even though you can't feel any breeze. You're in a jungle now. And right in front of you, completely motionless, is nothing. Or at least that's what you think. Until one of the leaves blinks. Your eyes widen. It's not a leaf at all. It's a moth, flat, veined, and colored so precisely like the foliage that if it hadn't moved, you would have walked right past it. The same goes for the twig over there that's actually a stick insect. And that stone near your foot. Nope. Frog. Welcome to camouflage, nature's original stealth mode. You step lightly, suddenly paranoid about stepping on something you can't see. All around you, life is playing hide and seek with reality. And the deeper you go, the more you begin to understand. This isn't random. This is design. Not conscious, not calculated, but evolved through millennia of trial and error. And underneath all of it, there's a code. Camouflage isn't just about color, it's about patterns, about disruption. Imagine trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, but every piece is painted in high contrast stripes. Your brain hates that. It's the same with animal markings. A zebra in the tall grass doesn't disappear so much as it becomes confusing. Too many stripes, too much movement, your brain can't track it. Mission accomplished. Historians still argue whether zebras evolved stripes primarily for camouflage or for other reasons, like confusing biting flies or regulating heat. But whatever the origin, the result is an animal wrapped in disruptive optical math. The same trick works underwater. Cuttlefish, the Picasso of the sea, can shift not just color but texture across their bodies, using thousands of tiny pigment sacs called chromatophores. One moment, they're speckled sand. The next, black and white checkerboard. Scientists still don't fully understand how they control these changes so rapidly. Some theories suggest their skin may act like a distributed brain, a network responding to light almost independently of thought. Then there's the mimic octopus. It doesn't just blend in, it performs. It can impersonate a lionfish, a sea snake, even a flounder, altering its shape and movement to sell the illusion. One creature, infinite disguises. It's nature's impressionist, and yes, it probably has a better costume box than you. Now lean in, because here's a truly oddball tidbit. Some caterpillars wear bird droppings as camouflage. No fancy mimicry, no optical tricks, just straight up, if I look gross, I won't get eaten. Effective, horrifying, kind of genius. But what really gets you lying here, half asleep in the underbrush, is how these patterns evolve. Slowly, iteratively. The ones that hide better survive longer. Those that stand out get picked off. Over thousands of generations, nature tunes its designs like a careful painter, adjusting colors, shapes, behaviors, until poof, invisible. And the math behind it. You see, camouflage often mimics the statistical noise of the environment. The speckles on a fawn's back match the dappling of light through leaves. The mottled skin of a toad echoes the randomness of muddy ground. It's all about breaking up outlines, confusing edges, delaying recognition. It's not invisibility, it's pattern interference. Some scholars even believe early human cave paintings captured this, that the mottled bison or fragmented reindeer on stone walls were a tribute not just to what was seen, but to what was barely seen. Shapes lost in the brush, outlines flickering between tree trunks, prehistoric camouflage studies scrawled in ochre. And let's not forget motion dazzle, a concept made famous during World War I. Ships were painted in bizarre, jagged stripes, called dazzle camouflage, to confuse enemy rangefinders. It didn't hide the ship, but it made its speed and direction hard to judge. Animals had figured this out long before we did. Even in your own life, camouflage pops up. Think of army fatigues, hunting jackets, or even fashion prints. Leopard spots, tiger stripes, nature's designs reprinted on polyester. You might wear them to blend in, or sometimes, paradoxically, to stand out. But camouflage isn't just visual. Some animals disguise sound. Burrowing owls mimic rattlesnakes to scare off predators. Lyrebirds can imitate chainsaws, camera shutters, car alarms. Camouflage in the auditory realm becomes mimicry, and mimicry is a kind of code, a lie told in the right frequency. You crouch now, watching a leafhopper freeze mid-motion. It's not doing much, just waiting, because stillness is camouflage too. Your brain is wired to detect movement. Stillness makes things vanish. And then it hits you. You are surrounded by a world that specializes in not being noticed. It's humbling, really. The jungle doesn't flaunt, it hides. Life survives not by being loud, but by being clever, by following patterns you weren't even looking for. But underneath it all, the rules are mathematical. Angle, contrast, shape, repetition. The same toolkit that builds snowflakes and spiderwebs and galaxies also hides leaf bugs and stonefish and owls perched against bark. And not all camouflage is passive. Some species flip the script. Bright colors say, "Don't eat me, I'm poisonous." That's called aposematism. But then, plot twist, some harmless animals copy that look anyway. That's Bayesian mimicry, named after a 19th century scientist who realized that nature runs con games. A non-poisonous butterfly paints itself like a toxic one. A harmless snake sports the same red-black-yellow pattern as a venomous cousin. The predators don't know the difference. They just don't risk it. It's camouflage by association. You rest your head against a fallen log, eyes blinking slowly. And as your vision blurs, you realize you've stopped trying to spot animals entirely. You're not looking for shapes anymore. You're looking for glitches, for that twitch of motion, that ripple of contrast. Because now you know, if you can see it, it probably wasn't meant to be seen. The real action in nature, it's happening just beneath the edge of perception. And that soft flicker at the corner of your vision, it might not be your imagination. It might just be something very well hidden, finally moving on. You don't open your eyes yet, but you feel the terrain shift beneath you again. Soft moss turning to dry grass, the whisper of jungle humidity fading into the thrum of something more open. There's a breeze now, and with it comes the sound of hooves. A slow, steady clop somewhere out in the distance. You crack an eye open and see it. A lone zebra standing still under the early morning light. Its black and white stripes ripple slightly in the heat, almost vibrating. Behind it, the savanna stretches wide and gold, grass moving in slow waves like a shimmering ocean. You stare at the zebra. It stares back. Neither of you moves. And once again, your brain does the thing. It starts looking for the code. At first glance, zebra stripes seem like a fashion choice. Bold, graphic, the kind of print someone might wear to a music festival and immediately regret. But out here in the real world, there's something else entirely. A walking optical illusion. Here's the kicker. No one agrees on why zebras have stripes. Seriously. This isn't one of those scientists used to think X, but now we know Y situations. This is still hotly debated. Historians of biology argue whether it's camouflage, social signaling, insect deterrence, or temperature regulation. The stripes might be one thing or 5 things at once. Let's start with the most obvious, hiding. At first glance, the zebra doesn't seem like it's hiding anything. Black and white, on a golden field of grass, that's not camouflage, that's a billboard. But zoom out and things change. Zebras are herd animals. From a distance, a group of them becomes a swirling, stripy mass. No outlines, no individual shapes, just confusion. A lion doesn't see one target. It sees visual chaos. That's motion dazzle again. The same concept that showed up with those WWI battleships. The stripes don't help zebras vanish. They make it harder for predators to lock in on speed and direction. It's like trying to track a single barcode while 100 of them are running in every direction. And about those barcodes, Each zebra's stripe pattern is unique, like a fingerprint. Some are tighter, some looser, some zigzag. No two are the same, just like snowflakes, just like you. Now let's talk temperature. Some researchers believe the alternating dark and light stripes might help regulate heat. The idea goes like this: black absorbs heat, white reflects it. If those areas warm at different rates, tiny air currents might form between them, creating a personal cooling system. Built-in AC, possibly nonsense, possibly genius. Studies have shown mild effects, but the debate is ongoing. Then there's the bug theory. Blood-sucking flies, like tsetse and horseflies, hate stripes. In experiments, flies avoided striped surfaces compared to solid-colored ones. Something about the high-contrast pattern confuses their visual system. Too many hard edges, maybe, or just not enough to lock onto. So in a world of biting insects and blood-borne disease, stripes might be better than any insect repellent you could bottle. Even domestic animals don't escape this phenomenon. Farmers have started outfitting cows in zebra-striped coats, not for fashion, but to reduce fly bites. And apparently, it works. Fringe theory time. There's a claim floating around that stripes could influence magnetic fields. That perhaps animals sense or manipulate magnetic patterns in their environment using pigment distribution. It's way out there, but it's a fun thought. Nature doodling on itself to play with invisible forces. But you know what might be the most underrated reason for stripes? A social coding. Zebras recognize each other by their stripes. Mothers imprint on the stripe patterns of their foals. Groups can identify members just by pattern, like facial recognition, but abstract. It's not just about evading predators. It's about belonging, navigation, knowing who's who in a herd of identical horses wearing barcode pajamas. Even the way the stripes curve matters. Around the shoulders, the pattern swirls in arcs. Around the belly, it tightens into rings. These aren't random doodles. They're precise anatomical maps. You look back at the zebra, it's still there, still looking at you like it knows you've been decoding it, and maybe you have. You imagine its body as a language, one written not in letters but in patterns, one that evolved not through planning but through survival. 1,000 generations of trial, error, and mutation until the zebra became a walking enigma of stripes and silence. And let's not forget, humans didn't invent barcodes. Nature had them first. Your breath slows. The zebra turns its head and walks away, its stripes rippling as it moves through the tall grass. And for a moment, it disappears, not because it's hidden, but because your brain can't decide how to see it. It's still there, but lost in its own interference pattern. And then something curious happens. You start seeing stripes everywhere. The grass itself bending in rows, the shadows cast by acacia trees, the sky streaked with light and cloud. Even your own fingers folded across your chest echo the same linear code, parallel, repeating, coordinated. Nature, it seems, doesn't just decorate, it communicates. Stripes can signal danger, attraction, camouflage, temperature, identity. It all depends on context. They're multifunctional, dynamic, living codes that adapt in real time. You lie back now, watching clouds shift overhead. And suddenly, the sky becomes a zebra too. You shift slightly, the imagined savanna fading behind your eyes, and now the light changes again. Less golden, more iridescent. You're somewhere softer, cooler. The ground beneath you is smooth stone, and above, there's a slow shimmer of color, blue, green, purple, slipping across surfaces like spilled oil. You reach out your hand, and instead of grabbing air, you brush against something that looks like stained glass. A butterfly wing. Up close, it's not just beautiful, it's otherworldly. The colors don't seem to sit on the wing, they float, flickering, shifting, like they're made of light, not pigment. And that's because, in a way, they are. This isn't ordinary color. This is structural coloration, a trick of physics, not dye. The butterfly's wing doesn't reflect light like your shirt or your blanket. Instead, it manipulates it. Layers of microscopic scales, stacked just right, interfere with light waves, amplifying some colors while canceling others. It's like butterfly nanotech. And the effect, iridescence. That shimmering, angle-dependent gleam you see not only on butterflies, but also on peacock feathers, beetle shells, hummingbird throats, and the occasional overachieving soap bubble. It's one of nature's flashiest codes. Don't wear your color, build it from light. Here, where it gets stranger. Each scale on a butterfly's wing is shaped like a roof tile, flat, overlapping, precise. And those tiles aren't smooth, they're ridged like tiny Venetian blinds. The spacing of those ridges controls the interference pattern. Change the spacing by just a nanometer or two, and the color shifts entirely. This isn't coloring inside the lines. This is engineering at the molecular level. Historians still argue whether ancient cultures understood structural color or simply admired it. The Aztecs, for instance, used iridescent beetle wings in art and jewelry. In Japan, beetle wing lacquerware shimmered in sacred spaces. They didn't know why it shimmered, but they knew it felt important, magical, sacred, like the object was humming with a hidden language. You tilt your head now, and the wing in front of you flares, suddenly blue, then green, then blue again. You blink. It's the same wing, the same scale structure, but the light has shifted, and so has everything. Some species go even further. The morpho butterfly, native to Central and South America, takes structural color to an extreme. Its wings seem electric blue, not because of pigment, but because of light-bending scales. They act like tiny optical devices, bouncing light back with insane efficiency. You can spot a morpho flying from half a kilometer away, like a neon sign flapping through the jungle. Scientists have even tried to reverse engineer those scales. One team developed anti-counterfeit security films based on morpho nanostructures. Another mimicked the effect to improve solar panels, making them more efficient by bending light like butterfly wings do. But here's the funny part. The underside of the morpho's wings, totally dull, mud brown, like, "Don't eat me, I'm just dirt brown." When it lands and closes its wings, the flash disappears. It goes from LED billboard to leaf mulch in under a second. Magic and stealth, because why pick one? Now, not all butterflies use iridescence. Some use pigments, sure, but many species combine both, layering pigment for base color and microstructure for shimmer. It's a dazzling combo, and it often plays a role in mate selection, territory defense, or predator deterrence. It's not just pretty, it's coded communication. Males might flash certain patterns to attract females. Some patterns are only visible in ultraviolet light, a spectrum most humans can't see, but butterflies can. That means there's an entire secret messaging system going on, right under our noses. Or above our noses, really. You look up now and a swirl of butterflies dances past like a living kaleidoscope. Their flight seems chaotic, but it is. Each flap, each angle shifts their color pattern. They're not just flying. They're sending signals, warnings, invitations, distractions, all built into their bodies at a microscopic level. Fringe theory time. There are researchers exploring the possibility that these patterns may shift over time due to environmental signals. That butterfly wings might not just be hard-coded in the cocoon, but partially influenced by climate, temperature, or diet. In other words, a butterfly's wing might be a response as much as a blueprint. If that's true, it means their colors are alive in some way, not static art but living data. You smile because the idea is strangely comforting, that the most delicate things in the world, the wings of a butterfly, might also be hyper-responsive. Engineered for beauty, yes, but also adaptability. And it's not just butterflies. The same physics underpins peacock feathers, where tiny barbules diffract light into impossible blues and greens. Interestingly, peacock feathers contain no blue pigment. None. It's all structure, all light tricks. The birds are literal optical illusions. Even beetles use this. Jewel beetles, tiger beetles, and fire chafers all flash their armor with structural coloration. Some species even shift color as they age or when their exoskeleton dries. It's not just sparkle, it's status, mood, health, warnings. And in rare cases, these structural patterns form polarized light signals, the kind that only certain insects can perceive. Entire conversations happening in light polarization. invisible to us but glaringly obvious to a butterfly. You lie back now, eyes half-lidded, watching iridescence flicker in the air above you. The colors don't sit still. They play, they morph. And you realize this isn't just a trick, it's a living lens, nature's code etched into structure, not just drawn on top. Color, it turns out, isn't a fixed truth. It's perception, interaction, vibration. Two people can see the same butterfly and one sees blue while the other sees green, depending on the light and the angle. That's not failure, it's built in. And you're drifting now. Light itself seems to soften. Your own thoughts flicker like iridescent scales, shifting as you look at them, never quite landing in one color for long. And somewhere quietly, a butterfly lands. Invisible until it moves again. Stillness returns, but only for a moment. Now there's a new kind of tension in the air, something taut, something precise. You feel it before you see it. A kind of geometric quiet, like the pause between notes in a song that knows it's about to become something intricate. And then, as your eyes adjust to the darkness, you see it, a spider web. It's backlit by the faintest shaft of moonlight, like a blueprint hanging in space. The silken threads shimmer just enough to betray their existence, circular, radial, impossibly delicate. You tilt your head slightly, trying to trace the pattern. It's perfect, too perfect, but not in the way machines are perfect. It's nature's version of perfect, full of intention, shaped by instinct, and alive with tiny flaws that make it more beautiful, not less. You inch closer. You can see the anchor lines, thick and strong, stretching to nearby branches. Then the frame, then the spiral threads in the center. It's all there, following an architectural code, unwritten yet unfailing. Orb weaver spiders are the quiet civil engineers of the animal world. They spin these webs from scratch, sometimes every single night, following a highly structured plan that they never learned in the usual sense. There's no trial notebook, no blueprint stashed under a leaf, and yet the design is consistent. Radial spokes connected by a sticky spiral, all optimized for catching prey with as little silk as possible. And here's the odd part. The spider can't even see it. Most orb weavers have poor vision. They rely on touch and vibration. As they construct the web, they move by memory and feel, step counting like living metronomes. Scientists call this stereotyped behavior, instinctual sequences of actions triggered by internal clocks and spatial cues. It's like the spider is running a subroutine. Wake up, anchor thread, build radius, lay sticky spiral, wait. But don't be fooled. This isn't just mindless programming. Studies show that spiders adapt their webs to their environment. They angle webs differently depending on wind direction. They make them tighter or looser depending on humidity. Even damaged webs get repaired intelligently, patched up like a seasoned craftsman filling in cracks. Historians still argue whether the spider's web is an evolved instinct or something closer to problem-solving behavior. Some ethologists suggest spiders possess a kind of embodied intelligence, where their understanding is in the doing, not in the knowing. You watch the spider now, motionless at the hub, each leg touching a different spoke. It's not just resting, it's listening. Every thread is a sensory extension. A trembling fly on the outer rim sends waves of information through the silk: location, size, energy. The spider doesn't just sense the world, it feels its own code vibrating back at it. And the math, oh, the math is rich here. Webs embody radial symmetry, logarithmic spirals, and tension optimization. A spider's silk isn't laid randomly. It's spaced to slow down flying insects just enough to tangle them, without tearing the structure. Engineers have modeled spider webs to study impact absorption. Some even mimic them in earthquake-resistant designs. Here's your quirky tidbit: the dragline silk, the thread the spider uses to anchor itself, is, by weight, stronger than steel. It's more elastic than nylon, and spiders produce it on demand, spinning it out of specialized glands like a biological 3D printer. You lie there, watching this tiny architect suspended between branches, and a strange thought creeps in. This is more than a trap. It's a map. Each thread connects something, branch to branch, movement to meaning. The web is both structure and sensor, passive and active. It isn't just waiting for prey, it's decoding the environment in real time. Some researchers have even studied how webs change based on moonlight. That's right, moonlight. Spiders exposed to brighter nights build denser webs. The reason? Unclear. Maybe it's defensive. Maybe it affects how insects move. Or maybe the moon is part of the code too. And speaking of codes, NASA once sent spiders to space. In microgravity, the web started weird, lopsided, tangled. But after a few days, the spiders adjusted. They reoriented themselves, rebuilt their webs, and spun new ones adapted to the strange physics. Even in space, the code kicks in. Not rigidly, but flexibly. Now imagine that. Floating in a zero-G chamber, a spider still spinning circles, listening to silk. That's not programming. That's poetry. And there's one more twist. Certain types of spiders decorate their webs with stabilimenta, zigzag patterns of thick silk that don't catch prey but reflect light. Some believe these are warning signs for birds. Others think they lure in more insects. Still others wonder if they're camouflage, or even messages to other spiders. The stabilimentum is optional, but spiders keep making it. Like an artist signing a painting, like a tag on a digital file. Maybe it's not necessary. Maybe it's just expression. You smile. Because in the end, the web is more than its purpose. It's a structure, a sensor, a canvas, and a diary. Every strand has tension, every junction decision. Even if no one reads it, the spider writes it anyway. And so you close your eyes beneath this gossamer cathedral, knowing that somewhere above, a creature smaller than your thumb has mapped its world in silk, without ever needing to see it. It just knows. And in its silent geometry, so do you. You feel the vibration before the sound, a low, rhythmic whoosh like waves of wind combing through the sky. You open your eyes to movement, not yours, but everything else. Above you, hundreds, no, thousands of birds swirl in coordinated arcs. Starlings, a murmuration. You sit up slowly, watching the sky ripple like a dark, liquid ribbon. They turn, twist, scatter, and regroup, each movement fluid, each pattern unfolding with impossible grace. And yet there's no conductor, no leader, no signal you can see. It looks like magic. But of course, there's a code. This is collective behavior, the mathematics of many. A biological algorithm played out in real time. Each bird in the flock is following simple rules. Keep a certain distance, align with your neighbors, avoid collisions. That's it. No central command, no master plan, just local decisions creating global order. It's called emergence, a phenomenon where complexity arises from simplicity, like ants forming bridges with their bodies, like fish moving as one to avoid a predator, or traffic patterns that appear out of nowhere when no one's using their turn signal. Looking at you, Tuesday commuters. And you're right in the middle of it now. The birds above you, so close you can hear the rush of their wings, aren't just flying. They're calculating, constantly adjusting position, speed, orientation. Scientists have tried to model these movements using rules from physics, coding, even finance. Turns out, the equations that govern bird flocks also pop up in economic market simulations. Go figure. Historically, these murmurations have been observed for centuries. Aristotle described them as dances of the air. Medieval scholars assumed the birds were tethered by invisible threads. One 17th century theory suggested they were controlled by moonlight, like tides in feathered form. And today, biologists still argue over the details. Some say murmurations help birds confuse predators. Others believe they serve as information networks, allowing the group to share real-time updates about food, danger, direction. Still others see it as a form of social synchronization, a way of bonding the flock through motion. Whatever the reason, the effect is mesmerizing. Now shift your gaze downward. In a nearby stream, fish are doing the same thing. Silvery schools move as a single body, twisting and flashing like mercury. One turns, they all turn. One startles, they scatter. There's no lag, no hesitation. its reaction at the speed of instinct. And again, the rules are simple. Stay close, don't bump, mimic direction. Just 3 principles, and yet out comes fluid motion. If you've ever watched sardines dodge a predator, you've seen real-time geometry. If you've ever been in a crowd that suddenly parts like a river around a street performer, you've lived it. And then off in the distance, a shape slices through the birds. The hawk. Immediately, the flock splits, then folds back in on itself. No chaos, no panic, just transformation. The group forms a wave, opens like a book, snaps shut again. This, right here, is predator evasion encoded into behavior. The hawk can't focus on one bird because the swarm keeps changing. It's the same logic as the zebra's stripes, but 3-dimensional and airborne. And yet, there's something more to it than survival. There's beauty, precision, a choreography no one taught but everyone knows. You lie back again, eyes following the skyscript written by feathers. Even insects do this. Swarms of locusts, clouds of midges, fireflies blinking in sync. Fireflies, by the way, don't just flicker randomly. Some species synchronize entire forests. Millions of tiny lights blinking on and off in a slow, dreamy wave. Scientists call it coupled oscillation. You call it jaw-dropping. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Even slime molds, those gooey, brainless blobs, can exhibit collective intelligence. Separate them and they'll wander. Bring them together and they'll form efficient networks to find food. One experiment even showed slime molds solving a miniature model of Tokyo's railway system. It took them hours. We took decades. No offense. And it gets weirder. When researchers record flocking patterns and plot them mathematically, they find something fascinating. The group behaves like a critical system, poised on the edge between order and chaos. Not too rigid, not too random, just balanced, like a flock tuning itself for agility. You feel that balance in your own breath now. Slow inhale, slower exhale. As if your body's joining in, syncing with the rhythm of wings overhead. This is the secret of swarms. Not perfection, but responsiveness. They don't need to plan. They just need to be ready. You watch as the murmuration contracts and vanishes over the horizon. The sound fades with it, replaced by the distant splash of fish and the whisper of tall grass returning to stillness. And suddenly, you feel it in your own limbs. That same impulse, that twitch of coordination, the sense that if everyone around you moved, you know which way to go without needing to ask. The knowledge that somewhere inside your muscles, there's a tiny algorithm, a set of rules for being part of something bigger. You've followed it before, in a crowd, in a dance, in a moment when everything moved together and you didn't think, you just flowed. Like the starlings, like the fish, like nature itself, writing its code in motion. Your eyes remain closed, but now there's warmth on your skin, sunlight, filtered through something tall and leafy. A garden, maybe, or a field. You hear a soft rustle, the sound of wind moving through stiff stalks and broad leaves. And as you sit up, stretching, you realize what you're surrounded by. A spiral. Not a drawn one, a living one, 1,000 of them. Sunflowers. You stand at the edge of the field and gaze into the golden center of the plants, their faces tilted toward the sun. From a distance, it all looks uniform, rows upon rows of tall stems crowned in yellow. But then you get closer and you see it. The center of each flower isn't random. It's a spiral. Actually, it's two spirals, going in opposite directions. The seeds at the heart of the sunflower don't grow haphazardly. They follow a pattern called phyllotaxis. It's the arrangement of leaves, petals, or seeds in spirals that obey a mathematical sequence. And yep, you've seen this before. It's that old friend, the Fibonacci sequence, again, quietly embedded in biology. Each seed forms at a specific angle from the last, roughly 137.5 degrees. That, called the golden angle, and it's the most irrational number we know, which is a compliment, mathematically speaking. It means the seeds never overlap. They pack in tightly without wasting space, radiating outward in that hypnotic spiral pattern. You bend down, tracing the path with your finger. It goes out and around and out again like nature is drawing a whirlpool in slow motion. You can count the spirals, 34 in one direction, 55 in the other, or sometimes 21 and 34, or 89 and 144. Always Fibonacci numbers, always math in bloom. And it's not just sunflowers. Pineapples, pinecones, aloe, artichokes, cacti, all follow phyllotaxis. It governs where leaves emerge, how petals stack, how fruits cluster. It even shapes how tree branches fork, maximizing exposure to light and rain. Historians still argue whether early civilizations noticed this consciously. The ancient Greeks definitely flirted with the golden ratio in art and architecture, and Indian mathematicians were playing with these patterns long before Fibonacci's 13th century book made them famous in Europe. But nature had already been publishing its spiral manifesto for millions of years. Here's a quirky thought. Some people believe that if you whisper the golden angle into a sunflower, it might whisper back. Not in words, of course, but in pattern, in rhythm, in arrangement. Because this angle, this sequence, it's not a rule imposed from above. It's an emergent property, a result of simple rules and growth constraints that happen to create profound beauty. Think of it like this: a new seed forms. It wants sunlight, space, and access to nutrients. If it grows too close to the last one, they'll compete. so it grows at the most irrational angle possible to avoid alignment. That angle, 137.5 degrees, ensures it rarely lines up with any previous seed. Over time, those simple decisions become spirals. And you're standing in the middle of a field of them. You tilt your face to the sun like the flowers do. That's another trick, heliotropism. Young sunflowers track the sun across the sky, maximizing light absorption. They move subtly during the day, then reorient overnight, ready to start again. It's not spiritual. It's hydraulic, tiny changes in cell pressure causing the stem to bend. But when the flower matures, it stops turning. It freezes, usually facing east like it's listening for something. That orientation helps warm the flower in the morning, attracting pollinators early in the day. Again, not coincidence. Code. Every part of this plant is math. And not cold math. Not the boring kind from school where the numbers sit still on paper. This is living geometry. Spirals that adapt, ratios that breathe, symmetry that grows from the inside out. You walk slowly through the field, brushing your fingers across petals. Even the leaves are arranged in a spiral along the stem, following the same rules. It's a game of optimization. How to grow the most with the least interference. How to make light into life with as few wasted steps as possible. Plants don't think, but they do respond. And that responsiveness follows patterns. Some fringe researchers believe plants might even calculate, in their own slow chemical way. They sense gradients, time their movements, adjust their posture. Not conscious, not sentient, but computational. Not in circuits, in growth. You reach a clearing now, and at its center stands a single massive agave plant, leaves spiraling outward like armor. This one's special. It only blooms once in its lifetime. It waits for decades, storing energy, calculating conditions. And then, without warning, it erupts upward with a towering stalk of flowers. One great gesture. Then it dies. That pattern, too, is a kind of code. Not just when it blooms, but how. Many flowering plants follow what's called Fibonacci phyllotaxis, as if nature is quietly obsessed with this one specific sequence. And maybe it is. Or maybe the sequence is just the most efficient way to grow toward the light without blocking yourself. A problem solved a billion different ways, always with spirals. You sit back now, cross-legged in the dirt, surrounded by golden discs and soft buzzing. Bees move through the flowers in lazy arcs, their flight paths echoing the spiral, even if they don't know it. They don't have to know it. The code works anyway. And you're starting to feel it too. The pull of pattern, the ease of rhythm, that strange, sleepy comfort that comes from knowing the world isn't random, not entirely. That underneath the chaos, something spins quietly, consistently. From the galaxy to the sunflower to the shape your breath makes as it curls into the evening air. And just as you exhale again, another breeze passes through the field, and the heads of the sunflowers all shift, just slightly, like an audience leaning in, listening to the spiral unfold. You're still sitting in the sunflower field when the sky begins to darken, not in the ominous, end-of-days way, but in that slow, theatrical way storms prefer. A heavy pause settles over everything. The bees vanish. The petals stiffen. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble threads through the air like a warning whispered from miles away. You look up. Clouds tall, billowing, sculpted like frozen explosions, gather overhead. Thunderheads, cumulonimbus. They tower kilometers into the sky, engines of heat and moisture, and you suddenly remember, these aren't just clouds. They're machines. Enormous, self-assembling machines driven by invisible rules. You're about to meet chaos theory. Or rather, enter it. Because a single thunderstorm is a masterclass in unpredictable logic. Warm air rises, cold air sinks, water vapor condenses into droplets. Droplets gather, fall, evaporate, trigger more lifting. It's all incredibly logical on paper. And yet, when the storm hits, everything becomes guesswork. This is the paradox of chaos. It's not randomness. It's sensitive dependence on initial conditions. You've probably heard it called the butterfly effect. The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could set off a tornado in Texas. Not because wings control weather, but because small changes in complex systems ripple outward in ways we can't predict. Historians credit meteorologist Edward Lawrence with this insight. In the early 1960s, while modeling weather on one of the first computers, he rounded off a number, just a tiny decimal. But when he reran the model, the output was dramatically different. The system had diverged, permanently, just from a microscopic change. It was as if the code had a mind of its own. You lie back now in the dry grass, storm looming, and imagine a line of dominoes extending into infinity. If you tap the first one just a fraction harder, somewhere down the line the pattern will change. A new path, a new spiral, or maybe a thunderstorm where there wasn't one before. And here it is. The first fat drop of rain lands on your cheek, followed by another and another. You stay right where you are, letting it fall. Around you, the world doesn't panic, it adapts. Leaves tilt to channel water. Insects vanish into cracks. Birds perch low and still. Everything is acting like it's read the forecast, which in a way it has, coded into their instincts, their patterns, their evolution. But our forecasts, they break down fast. Even today, with supercomputers and satellite networks, we can only predict the weather a few days out with reasonable certainty. Beyond that, tiny variables accumulate. Heat currents shift. Pressure changes. A breeze nudges a cloud that nudges a front that spawns a low-pressure system over the ocean. And then boom, your sunny week becomes a flood. And it's not just the weather. Chaos theory shows up in everything. The beating of your heart, the spread of viruses, the movement of planets, the stock market, traffic, population dynamics, fluid motion, neurons firing, all governed by systems that are both rule-bound and wildly unpredictable when viewed from the wrong scale. It's like trying to predict a forest fire by staring at a single spark. But here's the beautiful part. Amidst all that unpredictability, patterns still emerge. Take strange attractors, those swirling, looping figures born out of chaotic systems. Lawrence discovered them while modeling weather. Instead of neat curves, his equations produced jagged, looping graphs that never repeated but stayed within a defined space. A kind of bounded madness, like a hurricane that always spins but never quite follows the same path. You sit up again now, soaked and blinking at the sky. Lightning splits the clouds in a way that seems completely arbitrary, except it's not. The bolt follows the path of least resistance, branching like a fractal, forking with precision. Just like tree roots, just like rivers. The storm, for all its drama, is following rules. Very sensitive rules, sure, but still rules. And then thunder rolls in, low and long, vibrating your ribs. For a moment, the entire world feels like it's breathing in sync. You remember the storm simulations scientists run, models where a few lines of code create storms, whirls, clouds, systems, all from basic fluid dynamics. You can even simulate them at home if you're into watching temperature cells interact like aggressive jellyfish. A visual reminder that complexity doesn't always need complexity to arise. Sometimes a few simple ingredients are enough: water, air, heat. Or, wing beats. Here's a fringe theory to chew on while the rain taps gently around you. Some chaos theorists believe the universe itself may be fundamentally unpredictable, not because it's flawed, but because it's just too sensitive. That deep down, under all the forces and fields, lies a baseline randomness that no equation can tame. And yet here you are, in a storm that somehow formed just above a sunflower field, with each raindrop falling in a pattern too complex to trace, but still, it feels familiar. Because chaos isn't just noise. It's unreadable structure. It's what happens when the code runs faster than we can follow. And nature, it runs that code constantly, at every scale. You lie back down, listening to the storm drift overhead, and you realize chaos is not something to fear, it's something to feel. It's the heartbeat of the world, thundering softly behind the patterns we can see, pushing spirals into seeds, pushing winds into whirlpools, pushing us, all of us, forward, even when we don't know where we're going. And just as quickly as it arrived, the rain begins to slow. A few final drops fall, then silence. Not empty silence, charged silence. The kind that waits for the next spark. The air is still damp but lighter now, cleansed, like something important just left the room. You inhale slowly and notice a new scent rising from the ground. Fresh soil, soft leaves, something faintly metallic. The storm has passed, but it left you a gift. A trail. You follow it without much thought, stepping over puddles and fallen petals until you come upon a clearing. It's empty at first glance, just grass, rocks, a few mud patches. But then there it is. A paw print. Large, sharp-edged, pressed deeply into the ground. Not fresh, but not old either. You kneel beside it, eyes tracing the ridges where toes pressed into earth. And just a few feet away, another print. Then another. A graceful arc of footprints leading away, like a sentence written in code. And that's when it clicks. These markings, the stripes, the spots, the swirls etched across fur and skin, they're not random. They never were. Each tiger's stripe pattern is unique, just like a fingerprint. Every cheetah's spots, every giraffe's patches, every leopard's rosettes, all different, all specific, and all governed by something deep inside. It's not just art. It's Turing patterns. Yes, that Turing, Alan Turing, the British mathematician and computer science pioneer. He didn't just invent the concept of the modern computer or help crack the Nazi Enigma code. In the final years of his life, he turned his mind to biology. Specifically, how complex natural patterns, like stripes, spots, and spirals, can arise spontaneously from a uniform starting point. The theory he proposed is now called reaction diffusion. Here's the gist. Imagine two chemical substances diffusing through an embryo. One activates pattern formation, the other inhibits it. They spread at different rates, reacting and canceling each other out in complex ways. Over time, they generate a stable pattern, stripes, spots, or something in between, all from a flat, blank biological canvas. And the best part, this happens without DNA explicitly saying, "Put a stripe here." The DNA encodes the rules for the chemicals. The chemicals take it from there. It's like handing a child the basic tools for painting and letting the brush do the rest. Historians still argue how close Turing came to solving this. His ideas were ahead of the tools available, and his papers went largely ignored during his lifetime. But modern geneticists and biophysicists have since picked up the trail. They've found real chemical systems, like morphogens, that match Turing's models almost exactly. Zebrafish, Turing patterns. The ridges on your fingerprints, also likely Turing patterns. Even the spacing of hair follicles in mammals or the pigmentation on seashells. Same model. A few chemicals diffusing across a surface, running a kind of analog computation in real time. And tigers. Tigers are masters of the reaction diffusion code. Their stripes aren't just camouflage. They're a map of how pigment cells formed during embryonic development. The spacing of those dark lines corresponds to the oscillation between chemical activation and inhibition across the skin. Some tigers have broader stripes. Some have more. It all depends on timing, diffusion rates, and randomness. Not randomness as in chaos. Randomness as in sensitivity. Tiny changes in conditions create enormous visual differences. Kind of like the storm, remember? And while we're here, let's talk cheetahs. Cheetahs are born with solid-colored fur. The spots develop as they age, as pigmentation unfolds. Occasionally, a cheetah is born with stripes instead, what scientists call a king cheetah. It's rare but stunning, and it appears to be the result of a slight mutation in the genetic controls of those morphogens. Change the rules just a little, and spots become lines. The code doesn't fail, it mutates. And out comes a new design. You look down at your own arm now. The freckles, the veins, the subtle folds and lines. Your body is patterned too, not just by chance, but by the same quiet logic that paints a tiger. You walk forward again, following the trail of paw prints through the grass, imagining the animal that made them. Imagine watching its stripes develop, not painted, not tattooed, but emerging. A little darker each day, a little more defined, until one morning there it is, a creature wearing its chemical story on the outside. And it's not just for show. These patterns serve real purposes: camouflage, thermoregulation, communication. Some animals display ultraviolet patterns invisible to humans. Others have patterns that confuse predators or attract mates. But sometimes, the pattern doesn't have a job. Sometimes, it's just there because the math said it should be. That's the strange beauty of reaction diffusion. It creates order from nothing. No artist, no master plan, just chemicals, space, and time, like nature doodling on itself while waiting for lunch. Here's your quirky tidbit. Certain lizards, like the ocellated lizard of Europe, change their spots as they age, not gradually, but through something called cellular automata. Their skin behaves like a self-updating grid, flipping from spot to spot based on the patterns around them. It's like a biological version of Conway's game of life, playing out on reptile scales. You pause now, reaching the edge of a small pond. The trail disappears, but in the still water you catch a reflection, not just of yourself, but of the patterns all around. The bark of a nearby tree mottled and flacking, the veins of a lily pad, the ripple of a mosquito landing. All reacting, all diffusing. And somewhere in the distance, a tiger waits, Its stripes not designed, not dictated, but emerged. And that may be the most astonishing thing of all. That nature doesn't need a pen. It just needs space. And a few rules. You're still beside the pond, still thinking about those stripes, how they emerge, how they follow the rules without anyone ever writing them down. The water reflects a soft gray sky now, with clouds drifting like lazy thoughts. You stare into your own reflection, and then, without quite meaning to, look beyond it. Inside, deep inside. What about you? What about the code your own body follows? And suddenly you're shrinking, not literally but mentally, zooming inward past skin, past muscle, past organs, down into the cellular world where everything moves without asking permission. You pass a single cell as it floats, divides, moves, fuses. This tiny blob doesn't think, but it knows what to do. Welcome to cellular patterning, nature's inner choreography. You land gently beside a group of cells clustered together under a microscope's imaginary eye. They're not random. They're organized, shaped by gradients, adhesion, mechanical force. Some are dividing, some are migrating, some are dying on cue. Each one is following a script written in chemistry, but not recited word for word. Because the trick is this: the code isn't rigid, it's dynamic. Let's start with one of the most basic miracles you never think about: mitosis. One cell becoming two, two becoming four, over and over until you emerge, eyes, hands, lungs, heart. 100 trillion cells, all descended from that first one, all knowing when to split, when to stop, and what to become. That's the question that keeps developmental biologists up at night. Because it's not just about genetics. The DNA is the same in almost every cell in your body. Your toenail cells, your liver cells, your brain neurons, they all carry the same blueprint, but they read it differently. Like a choir singing from the same sheet music but choosing different verses in different keys at different times. Historians trace this idea back to the early 20th century, when scientists first realized that cellular differentiation, the process by which cells become specialized, must be controlled by more than genes. Signals must be involved, positional information, chemical gradients. Think of a developing embryo like a landscape of hills and valleys. Cells roll downhill into their eventual identities, influenced by forces both internal and external. This metaphor was coined by C.H. Waddington, who called it the epigenetic landscape. But you don't have to memorize the terms, just picture it. A cell at the top of the hill could become anything. As it moves, choices narrow. By the time it reaches the valley, it's a liver cell, or a neuron, or a skin cell. The journey is shaped by signals, proteins, hormones, gradients. And once a cell makes its choice, it doesn't usually look back. Usually. But sometimes, cells don't stop. That's where things go wrong. That's where we enter the shadowy border between pattern and pathology. Because the same code that builds you can also break you. Take cancer, for instance. A cell forgets how to stop dividing. It ignores signals. It breaks the rules. It becomes greedy with space and time. Not evil, just a pattern gone rogue, a loop that doesn't end. Even here, though, the math still applies. Tumor growth follows models, doubling rates, invasion angles, vascular patterning. There's even a whole field of tumor geometry. Fractal models have been used to predict how aggressively a tumor will spread. Complexity, once again, as both beauty and danger. You blink and the scene shifts slightly. Now you're looking at stem cells, the wild cards, the undifferentiated wonders. These are the cells that can become anything given the right instructions. They exist in embryos, yes, but also in your adult body, tucked away in bone marrow, skin, brain, waiting. The potential in them is staggering. Some scientists believe understanding stem cell behavior could unlock the future of regenerative medicine. Others caution that we barely understand how to control them. Like fire, powerful, useful, and potentially catastrophic when let loose. And the more we study, the more mysterious things become. Here's your fringe fact. There's a theory that cells communicate using bioelectric fields, not just chemical signals. That they emit and respond to electrical patterns which influence how they grow, where they go, even what they become. Cells with memory. Not memory like yours. No childhood flashbacks or favorite songs, but positional memory, a kind of spatial awareness. In experiments, scientists have manipulated bioelectric fields in tadpoles and gotten them to grow extra eyes on their tails without changing their DNA, just by changing the code that cells use to understand where they are. And if that doesn't make your spine tingle just a little, maybe this will. Some cells know when they're part of something broken. Damaged tissue triggers regrowth. Broken bones call for reinforcement. Skin wounds knit themselves closed. There's a logic to it. A kind of built-in troubleshooting guide. But even the repair process is full of weird elegance. You've probably heard of pattern formation in organisms like salamanders. Cut off a limb and they regrow it. Bones, muscles, skin, even nerves. The blueprint lives on in the cells nearby. They remember what a limb looks like. They rebuild it not from scratch, but from a map that's always been there. You lie back once more, mind drifting with this new perspective. Because now, you're not just a person lying still. You're a colony. A walking, breathing pattern made up of patterns. Cells that dance, cells that obey, cells that adapt. You're a masterpiece of boundaries, knowing exactly when to grow and when to stop. Except sometimes they don't. Sometimes the rules bend, change, evolve. And yet here you are, still intact, still humming with quiet logic, still shaped by code you never chose, but carry forward with every breath, every blink, every hour of dreamless sleep. Your body is not a machine. It's a pattern that remembers. The night is quieter now, heavy, settled, like the air has curled up and gone to sleep around you. You lie there for a while, letting your breath slow, letting the idea of all those tiny cellular patterns sink deeper into your skin. But something's shifting again. Not outside this time. Inside. You feel it as a subtle flicker behind your thoughts, like a dream you're about to enter or a code you're not quite authorized to read. And then, without warning, you're shrinking again, only this time much further down. Smaller than a cell, smaller than a strand of DNA. Welcome to the quantum layer. Yes, it's real. Yes, it's science. And yes, it's very weird. You're not floating through familiar biology anymore. Now you're inside the strange frontier of quantum biology, the place where life seems to cheat the rules of classical physics, and the universe quietly whispers, "You thought that was weird. Watch this." Start here, the simple act of photosynthesis. Sunlight hits a leaf. A photon gets absorbed. An electron gets excited and needs to move quickly, efficiently from one molecule to another. But instead of bouncing around at random like a pinball, it does something bizarre. It tries every possible path at once. This is called quantum coherence, the ability of a particle to explore all routes simultaneously before choosing the most efficient one. In essence, the electron samples the options in parallel, then locks in the best route. This process, which happens in less than a trillionth of a second, is what allows plants to convert sunlight into energy with near-perfect efficiency. Far better than anything we've built. Far better than what we thought biology was even capable of. And you know what's even weirder? It's not just plants. Birds might be using quantum mechanics to navigate. That's right. The European robin, for example, migrates thousands of kilometers every year, following magnetic fields that scientists believe it sees, not with its eyes, but with proteins in its retina that behave like quantum sensors. These proteins, called cryptochromes, may form entangled electron pairs, tiny twins that react in perfect sync, no matter the distance. Their reactions are altered by Earth's magnetic field, possibly creating a sort of visual map layered on top of the bird's normal sight. Historians still argue whether this magnetic sense is truly quantum. But if it is, then that little robin is using a navigational system Einstein himself was skeptical of. And we're not done yet. Let's talk about enzymes, the tiny catalysts inside your cells. They speed up chemical reactions by factors of millions or billions. And in some cases, they do it by enabling quantum tunneling. Hear how that works. Imagine a particle faced with a barrier. Classically, it shouldn't be able to pass through it. But in the quantum world, it doesn't care about walls. It might tunnel through, teleport, essentially, from one side to the other without breaking the barrier. Enzymes use this trick to transfer protons or electrons with blazing speed. The precision of it is staggering. It's like your cells have tiny particle physicists on staff. And then there's smell. For decades, scientists thought scent worked purely by shape, the idea being that a molecule fits into a receptor like a key in a lock. But that doesn't explain why some molecules with similar shapes smell totally different, or why some with wildly different shapes smell exactly the same. Enter the vibration theory of smell. It suggests that your nose doesn't just detect molecular shape, it detects how molecules vibrate. And it might be using a form of quantum tunneling to do it. Electrons jump between receptor proteins only if the molecule vibrates at a specific frequency. In other words, your nose could be hearing smells on a quantum level. You chuckle softly, because of course it is. Of course life, this wildly adaptive, creatively chaotic phenomenon, would reach into the quantum toolbox and borrow tricks from the most confusing layer of the universe. You might be thinking, wait, isn't quantum stuff just for subatomic particles, not whole organisms? That was the assumption for a long time. But quantum states are fragile. They break under heat, noise, complexity. And guess what living organisms are? Hot, noisy, and incredibly complex. So how is it that plants, birds, cells, even humans might be sustaining quantum effects long enough to use them? That's the real mystery. Some researchers believe biology has evolved ways to stabilize quantum states through protein scaffolds, vibrational shielding, or even coherent environments inside cells. Not because nature understands quantum theory, but because trial and error kept selecting for what works. And quantum works. It's not everywhere in biology, but where it shows up, it makes things sharper, quicker, more elegant. Fringe theorists naturally take it further. There are whispered speculations about quantum consciousness, the idea that the brain might exploit quantum effects in microtubules, tiny structures inside neurons, to generate awareness. No one's proven this. Most mainstream scientists are deeply skeptical, but the question remains open. What if your thoughts, the very act of wondering, are shaped in part by a level of physics we barely understand? You lie back once more, eyes closed, but somehow wider open than ever. Because now, you're not just a collection of cells. You're a cloud of probabilities, a ripple of potential, a system that runs not just on chemistry, but on possibility. And maybe that's why you sometimes feel strange in the quiet moments, like you're hovering between places, between memories, between states. Because maybe you are. Maybe all of life, sunlight on leaves, robins in flight, the smell of cut grass, is a symphony played not only in matter and motion, but in quantum whispers. Not visible, not certain, but undeniably real. There's a stillness to the forest now, the kind that doesn't just feel quiet, it is quiet. Not empty, not dead, just listening. The kind of silence that exists between systems, between thoughts, between pulses of life. You sit up slowly, the air thicker here and the ground beneath you is soft, almost too soft. You reach down and press your fingers into the mossy earth. It gives. Not like dirt, not like clay, this is something else. You dig a little deeper, and there it is. White filaments, thin as threads, branching like roots but not roots. A mycelium. You've just stumbled into the largest, least appreciated intelligence system on Earth. Not a brain, not a nerve network, but something quieter, slower, and much, much older. This is the Wood Wide Web, a vast underground network of fungi connecting tree to tree, root to root, in a living internet of information and cooperation. And yes, it's real. This isn't a metaphor. You are sitting on top of a literal communication system built by mushrooms. Let's zoom out. Fungi have two major parts. The mushroom, the bit you see above ground, is just the fruiting body, like an apple is to a tree. But the real action happens underground, where the mycelium spreads out in endless strands called hyphae, creating networks that can stretch for miles. These strands weave into the root systems of trees and plants, forming mycorrhizal networks, a mutually beneficial relationship. The fungi get sugars from the plants. In return, they provide water, nutrients, and access to distant parts of the soil. But that's just the basics. The real magic is in the signals. When one tree is attacked by pests, it can send out distress signals through the mycorrhizal network. Nearby trees pick up the warning and start producing defensive chemicals. This isn't instantaneous, but it's fast, and it's intentional. Trees talk through mushrooms. And it doesn't stop there. Some trees, usually older, larger ones, act as hubs in this underground network. Scientists call them mother trees. These trees distribute carbon, nutrients, even hormonal signals to younger saplings nearby. If a tree is sick or dying, it might dump its remaining resources into the network, passing them to others. It's not just competition, it's collaboration. Historians might scoff at the phrase tree communication, but it's grounded in decades of peer-reviewed research. Dr. Susan Simard, a Canadian forest ecologist, brought this network into public view after years of studying how forests aren't just collections of individuals, but communities woven together by fungal code. And this code, it's a kind of biological routing protocol. When trees are connected by different species of fungi, messages can still travel, but they slow down. Compatibility matters. Some species of fungi link many trees. Others form tight cliques. The result is an ecological intranet, dense, overlapping, self-regulating. And here's the quirky part. These networks can be manipulated. Some invasive plants tap into the system and steal resources. Certain trees block connections to neighbors they don't like. Others hoard. Still others go full Robin Hood, sending more carbon to weaker trees than they need themselves. It's messy, dynamic, political even. So the forest isn't peaceful because everything gets along. It's peaceful because everything is in constant, negotiated balance. And fungi. They've been running this show for over 600 million years. Some scientists even argue that plants only made it onto land thanks to fungi, which helped them absorb nutrients from hostile, barren soil. Mycorrhizal symbiosis wasn't just a partnership. It was an evolutionary leap. And these days, the largest living organism on Earth isn't a whale or a redwood. It's a fungus. Specifically, a 3.5 square mile network of Armillaria ostii, a type of honey fungus in Oregon. Genetically identical, connected underground, and estimated to be thousands of years old. You could walk across it and never know, because the intelligence is buried, quiet, slow, but undeniably there. Fringe theories. Oh yes. Some researchers and science philosophers have wondered if fungal networks might exhibit a form of distributed intelligence, not thought in the way we understand it, not memory as we define it, but something like it. Feedback loops, a signal waiting, dynamic adaptation. And then there's the elephant or mushroom in the room, psychedelic fungi. Species like Psilocybe cubensis or Amanita muscaria have long been used by human cultures for spiritual experiences. And while that's a separate rabbit hole, the idea that fungi can alter consciousness makes you wonder what kind of consciousness the fungi themselves operate in. They don't have brains, but they respond. They don't think, but they adapt. And their code is buried not in synapses, but in connections, in pathways that stretch across ecosystems like living neural networks. You lie back down, palms pressed to the moss, imagining the mycelium beneath you, not as roots but as wires, fiber optic cables of nature, transmitting not data packets but molecules, not ones and zeros but nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, carbon, distress signals. And somewhere a tree responds. Maybe not in seconds, but certainly in kind. Because nature doesn't rush. It coordinates. And in the end, the Wood Wide Web isn't just a system for survival. It's a map of interbeing. Everything affecting everything else. Every whisper heard. Every change rippling outward in silence. And as your breath softens, you begin to feel it too. That subtle hum of connection. From leaf to root. From root to thread. From thread to everything. You're still lying there, hands pressed to the moss, the ghost of the mycelial network humming quietly beneath you. But now, the world around you begins to shift again, cooling, sharpening, crystallizing. Literally. You blink, and before you can sit up, the ground beneath your fingertips begins to harden. The soft, damp soil seems to retract, replaced by something angular, rigid, geometric. Crystals. Not in a flashy, Instagram-mystic kind of way. This isn't a collection of overpriced amethysts on a windowsill. This is nature's crystalline code, silent, perfect, and utterly relentless. You're surrounded now by tiny towers of salt, clusters of square cubes rising from the ground like miniature skyscrapers. They sparkle faintly in the dim light, but their beauty is secondary. What really catches your breath is their order. Each one follows the same internal architecture. Sodium, chloride, repeat again and again, until the entire structure, microscopic or massive, forms a lattice so precise you could mistake it for human design. But it's just chemistry behaving predictably. Salt crystals always form cubes because of how the ions bond. Their charges, their size, the space they take up, all of it leads inevitably to this shape. There's no mystery in the ingredients, only in the outcome. Because no matter where you find them, in a sea cave, on your soup spoon, inside your sweat, they form with the same unwavering structure. Crystals are what happen when molecules decide to stop playing jazz and stick to sheet music. They organize, they lock in, they become visible order. And it's not just salt. You look to your left and see quartz. To your right, a patch of frost catching the air like lace. Crystals can form from minerals, gases, even living fluids. Snowflakes, remember, are crystals too, just ones that never got a chance to settle down. And now you're in the middle of a world that's built on crystals. Literally. Most rocks are aggregates of minerals, and most minerals are crystals. Your bones, crystal-like. Your DNA, wrapped around histone proteins in a pattern so precise it qualifies as a semi-crystalline structure. Even your inner ear contains tiny otolith crystals that help you balance. Nature loves structure. Historians were obsessed with crystals long before they understood them. The ancient Greeks thought quartz was ice that had frozen so hard it could never melt. In Renaissance Europe, alchemists believed crystals held secrets to immortality. And even today, crystal patterns appear in sacred art across cultures, not because of any specific knowledge of chemistry, but because symmetry feels divine. Here's your quirky tidbit. When scientists started growing crystals in zero gravity aboard space stations, they found the absence of gravity allowed them to form more perfectly than on Earth. No settling, no sagging, just pure geometric emergence. Crystals, in essence, are matter solving itself. You step gently across a crystalline floor now, careful not to disturb the delicate formations. And suddenly, you see something forming before your eyes. A single drop of water, salt water, slowly evaporating under a beam of sunlight. And as it goes, it leaves behind a lattice of tiny cubes, building themselves atom by atom. This isn't magic, it's thermodynamics. As water molecules evaporate, the ions in the salt are left behind. They float, then lock into place with each other, following electrostatic rules so fundamental they might as well be universal law. It's the same principle behind cave formations, stalactites, stalagmites, where dissolved minerals get deposited drip by drip, leaving behind calcite crystals. Or geodes, where minerals grow in hollow pockets over millions of years, forming glittering chambers hidden inside otherwise boring rocks. But crystal growth doesn't have to be slow. Some crystals form in seconds. Take snow again. One moment, water vapor. The next, a six-sided crystal branching out in beautiful symmetry. The transition is abrupt, but the pattern is inevitable. The molecules arrange themselves because that's what the math tells them to do. The code here is different from the spirals and stripes and fractals you've seen so far. Crystals don't curve. They align. They obey. Their beauty comes from strict symmetry, from edges. And yet the smallest irregularity, a tiny defect in the lattice, can change everything. A slight impurity, you get color. A misplaced ion, you get weakness. That's how diamonds, for all their apparent perfection, get their hues. Nitrogen for yellow, boron for blue. Imperfections coded into clarity. And speaking of diamonds, they're just carbon arranged in a particular lattice. Graphite, the stuff in your pencil, is also carbon, but the atoms are arranged differently. One structure gives you sparkle and hardness. The other smudges paper. The same element, different code. That's what crystal structure does. It rewrites the function of matter. You sit down now watching light refract through a clear crystal of selenite. It bends, splits, twists the world behind it, and you realize crystals don't just store structure, they manipulate it. That's why we use them in technology. Quartz oscillates at a predictable frequency, ideal for clocks and watches. LCD screens rely on liquid crystals, which flow like fluids but maintain some order like solids. They respond to electrical currents, changing their orientation, and thus, what you see on your screen. Even your phone runs on crystal logic. Silicon, at the heart of every computer chip, is a crystal. We etch circuits into it, using a material that nature already organized at the atomic level. Your entire digital life, it rides on the back of lattices. So yes, crystals are pretty, but they're also infrastructure. They're the meeting point of elegance and utility, of physical law and form. And while they may look static, they're part of a dynamic system of formation, destruction, and reformation. Crystals dissolve, rebuild, shift their faces depending on temperature, pressure, and time. You run a hand across the nearest wall, cool, smooth, impossibly flat. The surface feels still, but behind that stillness is a storm of electrons, a structure in perfect tension. And maybe that's the real beauty here. Not in the shimmer, not in the symmetry, but in the code that tells molecules where to stand. Not because someone orders them to, but because the rules of reality demand it. You're still seated in the crystalline corridor, the smooth surface beneath your fingertips catching bits of reflected light like fractured moonlight. But now the air begins to change, growing warmer, dustier, as if the minerals are giving way to something far more. Deliberate. You rise slowly and follow the trail. Not a random path this time, this one structured, curved then straight, angled then spiraled. It's clearly built not by humans but by something else with an eye for form. Soon, you're standing in front of a mound. Massive, towering over you. Spires reaching 10, 12, maybe 15 feet into the air, crusted with sun-baked soil, hollow tunnels winding through every level. A termite mound. And with that, you've entered the architectural chapter of nature's code. These aren't random piles of dirt. They're functional structures, ventilated, temperature-controlled, load-bearing towers, often built in perfect alignment with the sun's path. They house millions of termites, all coordinating their work without a blueprint, without language, and certainly without an architect standing around in a hard hat. So how do they do it? The answer, once again, is pattern by interaction. Termites use stigmergy, a kind of decentralized construction protocol. They respond to local cues. One termite lays down a bit of pheromone-laced mud. That spot now smells like a "build here" sign. Another termite follows, then another. The more popular a spot becomes, the faster it grows. It's not conscious planning, it's feedback loops. Simple rules, complex outcomes. Like fractals, like snowflakes, like everything else. Historians of biology still argue over whether stigmergy should be considered intelligence. But that debate misses the point. Whether or not a termite knows what it's doing, the result is stunning. Climate-controlled towers in the African savanna that maintain internal temperatures to within a few degrees, despite 40 degrees C swings outside. Some of these mounds even contain fungus farms, chambers where termites grow a particular species of fungus used to digest plant material. A living HVAC system, a food processor, a city, all packed into a dirt skyscraper built by creatures no larger than a grain of rice. And termites aren't the only animal architects out there. You turn a corner now and stumble into a very different kind of structure, a beaver dam. Across a slow-moving river, a wall of logs, mud, and brush holds back the water. Behind it, a tranquil pond. Inside that pond, a lodge, watertight, insulated, accessible only by underwater entrance. No wolves or bears or humans can get in easily. It's a fortress, a family home, a strategy. And again, no blueprint. Beavers operate on a mix of instinct and feedback. They hear running water and feel compelled to stop it. That's it. No lectures, no planning meetings, just behavior driven by stimuli. Yet the result is landscape altering. Beavers don't just build for themselves, they build ecosystems. Dams slow water flow, creating wetlands that support frogs, birds, fish, and more. They prevent erosion, filter pollutants, recharge groundwater. A single family of beavers can reshape an entire watershed, using little more than teeth, time, and code written into their DNA. You pause now beside the water, watching the lodge as the surface ripples. Something swims by, not a beaver this time, something smaller, flashier. A fish. No, a bird. Specifically, a bowerbird. You move closer, curious. This isn't a nest, it's a bachelor pad. Male bowerbirds build elaborate bowers, display structures made of sticks, leaves, shells, berries, bits of plastic. They're decorated with obsessive care, sorted by color even. Blue berries here, shiny beetle shells there. Some birds even manipulate perspective, arranging objects to create forced perspective effects. Larger items in the back, smaller ones in the front, to make their bowers appear bigger than they are. Think about that. A bird creating optical illusions to impress a mate. There's no evolutionary rule book that says use art to seduce. And yet here it is, architecture as expression, beauty as currency, pattern as persuasion. And all of this emerges from tiny brains and hardwired instincts. Or maybe that's not fair. Maybe instinct isn't lesser than intelligence. Maybe it is intelligence, just quieter, just deeper. You sit now on a patch of stone warmed by the sun, imagining all the creatures building all the structures you've never noticed. Swallows weaving mud nests under bridges. Ants excavating intricate tunnels with air shafts and food storage zones. Pufferfish drawing complex geometric circles in the ocean floor, perfect symmetry sculpted by fins alone. Humans like to think they invented architecture, but nature's been building for billions of years. Coral reefs, wasp nests, snail shells, spider burrows, all governed by natural forces, material constraints, and coded behavior. A termite doesn't know it's making a ventilation shaft, but it makes one anyway, because its instincts are encoded with function. Even slime molds lacking neurons or structure can solve mazes. They leave trails of slime behind them, memory of a kind, and use those to avoid retracing steps. They solve problems with form, with feedback, with pattern. Fringe theorists suggest that these construction behaviors, stigmergy, pattern following, feedback-based decision-making, might offer clues for designing robot swarms or AI systems. If ants can build bridges with their bodies, maybe machines can, too. Maybe the future of engineering lies in mimicking the ones who never needed math degrees. You lie back once more, staring at the canopy above, and you wonder how much of what you do is architecture. Your habits, your routines, your choices. You build your day, your body, your beliefs, constructing an inner lodge from repetition, instinct, and adaptation. You are your own builder. And just like the beavers, and just like the birds, just like the termite, who lays down one more grain of soil without knowing it's becoming a cathedral. You're still lying there, your body warm against the stone, when something finally pulls you inward, not toward the ground this time, but toward yourself. Not your thoughts, not your memories, just your structure, the you that exists under your skin. You breathe in, and then down you go, past your bones, past your organs, past the cells, the organelles, the mitochondria, into the spiral. It's hard to describe it at first, so familiar, so intimate, and yet so alien. A twisted ladder coiled like a snake asleep in its den, fragile but not, tiny but endless. Your DNA, the spiral inside you. You hover in its presence now, this double helix of nucleotides, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, each pairing off like old friends at a school dance. A to T, C to G, always the same, billions of times, repeated so precisely you'd think it would get boring. But it never does, because this is the code, the one that built you, the one that's still building you every second of every day. It's so small you never see it without a microscope. And yet, if you stretched out all the DNA in just one of your cells, it would be over 2 meters long. And you have around 37 trillion cells. That's enough genetic code to stretch from here to the moon and back several times. And somehow, all of it fits inside you. Tidy, compact, coiled up like a sleeping idea. But it's not sleeping, not really. It's busy. Reading itself, copying, folding, unfolding, wrapping around proteins called histones which help control which genes are on or off in each cell. Because despite every cell having the same DNA, not every cell uses it the same way. Skin cells activate one set of genes. Muscle cells activate another, a process called gene expression, orchestrated by a symphony of internal cues. Historians still argue over who truly discovered DNA. Watson and Crick famously, Rosalind Franklin more accurately, Morris Wilkins, Friedrich Miesser before them all. It was a collective effort spread across decades and disciplines. A pattern that only became visible once enough people looked closely enough. But DNA itself, it doesn't care who discovered it. It just does. You float now through a corridor of genetic code. Sequences unfurl beside you, strings of A's, T's, C, and G's scrolling like ticker tape. There's elegance here, but also a kind of absurdity. Your eye catches a section called a gene, a stretch of DNA that codes for a protein, a small recipe. But only about 1.5% of your DNA is actual genes. The rest, non-coding DNA, sometimes called junk, though that's wildly unfair. Because within that so-called junk are regulatory elements, switches, signals, scaffolds. Some parts might be evolutionary leftovers. Others might be crucial in ways we don't yet understand. The genome, like every great script, contains dialogue, stage directions, deleted scenes, and entire chapters we haven't deciphered yet. And then there's epigenetics, the software that tells your DNA how to behave. It's not about changing the letters. It's about changing which letters get read. Methyl groups stick to certain sections, blocking access. Acetyl groups open up others. These changes can be triggered by environment, diet, stress, sleep, even trauma. In other words, your life rewrites your code. And some of those edits can be passed down to your children. That's right. You're not just carrying the genetic pattern of your ancestors. You're shaping the genetic patterns of your descendants. Not by changing the hardware, but by annotating it. Like margin notes in an ancient book. And just when you think it can't get more mind-bending, there's the matter of transposons. Jumping genes. Sections of DNA that cut and paste themselves into new places, sometimes helpful, sometimes catastrophic. They can cause mutations, silence genes, or activate them unexpectedly. Your genome, it turns out, isn't static. It moves. It edits itself. It plays. One scientist once compared the genome to a jazz improvisation, ordered but spontaneous, familiar but constantly in flux. Fringe theory time. Some researchers have speculated that DNA might act as an antenna, that its spiral shape could allow it to absorb or emit electromagnetic frequencies. There's very little hard data to back this up, but the theory lingers on, like a whispered rumor in the halls of bioenergetics. You don't have to believe it, but it does make you wonder. If your DNA is a code, and it is, then who or what is reading it? And how did it come to be? Because here's the most curious thing of all. DNA is information. A sequence that stores instructions. It obeys rules. It can be copied, mutated, interpreted. We've even started using it to store digital files. That's right. Scientists have encoded books, music, and movies into synthetic DNA strands, not as a metaphor, as literal data storage. Why? Because DNA is incredibly compact, durable, and universal. The language of life, repurposed to hold Netflix episodes. You smile, because of course we did. You lie back again, mentally, physically, spiritually, and let the spiral float above you. It doesn't pulse, it doesn't glow, it simply is. A message written 4 letters at a time, passed from organism to organism for billions of years, edited, mistaken, copied again, and always spiraling forward. Not perfectly, but persistently. Because the code doesn't need to be flawless. It just needs to continue. And somewhere in your cells, in every single one of them, it does. Every blink, every heartbeat, every breath. A silent sentence unfolding inside you. You're still watching the spiral turn slowly, endlessly. But now the scale begins to shift again. Not smaller this time, but bigger, far bigger. You zoom upward past the cells and bones, past the skin and sky, beyond forests and mountaintops, past the very curve of the earth. Until finally, you're floating in a silence that makes everything else you've ever known feel small. A space. Still cold and at first empty. But then your eyes adjust, and the emptiness reveals itself to be absolutely packed. With pattern. Stars don't scatter randomly. They cluster. They form galaxies, and galaxies form clusters, which in turn form superclusters. Light years of structured energy. You tilt your head and begin to see it all not just as stars, but as structure, as something repeating, echoing, unfolding. Just like before. The spiral shows up here too. The Milky Way, the galaxy you call home, is a barred spiral galaxy, its arms sweeping outward in that same golden ratio swirl you've seen before in sunflower seeds and snail shells. A shape that optimizes motion and density. A shape that says, this is how things move when there's too much going on to keep track of. And you're not just in it, you're part of it. Because you, quite literally, are stardust. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your cells, all forged in the hearts of ancient stars that exploded long before your planet even existed. That's not poetic, that's physics. Every atom in your body was once part of something incandescent and enormous and ancient. You are a recycled pattern, a remix, a continuation. Historians of astronomy have known for centuries that the heavens followed rules. Galileo saw moons orbit Jupiter. Kepler figured out planetary ellipses. Newton gave us the math. But it wasn't until the modern age that we started noticing deeper patterns, not just in the movements of planets, but in the very layout of the universe. Because zoom out far enough, and the cosmos looks like foam. Yes, foam. Like the bubbles in your bath or the froth on coffee. The matter in the universe isn't evenly spread. It forms filaments and voids, creating a cosmic web, a three-dimensional scaffolding of galaxies linked by threads of gravity and dark matter. And those threads, they form fractal patterns. Just like trees, just like lungs, just like lightning. The universe is recursive, self-similar at scale. Galaxies spin, so do storms, so do seashells and whirlpools and hurricanes. Spiral dynamics appear again and again at every size, and no one really knows why. Some physicists believe it's a matter of energy dispersion, how systems minimize energy while maximizing organization. Others suggest these forms are just the most efficient way to arrange matter under the influence of gravity and angular momentum. Still, others think we're only seeing spirals because that's what our brains are wired to notice. And of course, there's debate. Some researchers argue the universe is fractal at every level. Others say it only appears fractal within certain scales, and beyond that it becomes truly random. No one has a definitive answer. Not yet. But what you do know, watching stars swirl across the vast dark canvas, is that it doesn't feel random. It feels organized. And then the symmetry shifts again. You spot a spiral galaxy, not the Milky Way this time, but NGC 1300, a stunning, swirling disk some 61 million light-years away. The arms curve beautifully, filled with stars, gas, dust, and maybe, just maybe, life. And at its core, a black hole, a singularity, an endpoint of gravity where space and time distort into mystery, where the code perhaps folds back in on itself. Because the cosmos doesn't just echo patterns, it contains paradoxes. It expands, but we don't know what it's expanding into. It obeys physical laws, but we don't fully understand dark energy or dark matter, which combined make up 95% of everything. We only see the leftovers, the 5% that glows. And yet, within that small slice, we see harmony. Orbital resonances, where moons and planets line up in repeating rhythms. Gravitational lensing, where light bends around mass, revealing the shape of invisible things. Even the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, ripples with temperature fluctuations that look almost like sound waves. You wonder, is the universe humming? Not metaphorically, but actually. Some scientists believe so. The early universe was filled with pressure waves, cosmic sound, traveling through hot plasma. Those ripples imprinted themselves on the distribution of galaxies. In a very real way, the universe contains echoes of its own first note. And we're still trying to hear the rest of the song. Quirky thought, if aliens exist, and if they too evolved under spiral galaxies with spiral shells and spiral seeds, do they see the pattern? Do they have their own golden angles, their own Fibonacci codes, or does pattern itself transcend biology? Is the code of nature universal? You don't need the answer, not tonight. You float quietly now, drifting between stars, feeling them not as distant suns but as points in a constellation you can't yet see. A pattern still unfolding, a message still being written. And then gently you fall, back through clouds of gas and nebulae, past galaxies and stardust and satellite rings, back toward Earth, back toward your breath, back toward the spiral inside you. Because every code you've seen, the fractals, the spots, the swarms, the stripes, they're all part of a larger pattern, one that spirals across time. From the first molecules to the farthest galaxies. One that writes itself, again and again, into tree rings and tiger stripes, into honeycomb and lightning, into your heartbeat and your dreams. It is not finished, and neither are you. You land softly, gently, like a feather touching down in the quiet after a long fall. Not in a field or a forest or a cave of crystals this time, but somewhere deeper, somewhere stranger. You're back within yourself. But this time not zooming down into the spiral of DNA, not floating through cells or tunneling between protons. This is a different kind of space, a liminal space, a pause between inhale and exhale, between heartbeat and thought. You're not watching the code anymore. You're sensing it. Because the deeper you've gone into nature's hidden patterns, the more you've begun to notice something unexpected. It never really ends. Every time you think you've reached the bottom of the spiral, it opens again. The pattern deepens. Fractals fold into more fractals. Spirals give birth to more spirals. It's endless. And so, maybe now's the time to step back. not to zoom in again, but to take the whole picture in at once. You close your eyes and see it unfold. The Fibonacci spirals in pinecones and hurricanes. The hexagonal blueprints of bees. The branching lightning and river deltas and lungs. The shimmering interference patterns in butterfly wings. The camouflage that confuses. The synchrony of bird flocks. The vibration of quantum particles. The invisible pulse of fungi beneath the forest floor. You see webs and whispers, echoes and structures, variations and constants. But above all, you see order inside the mess. Not a rigid order, not a cold mechanical perfection. No, this code doesn't march, it dances. It bends, it plays, it responds. It's not a line. It's a rhythm, a pulse, a language that speaks softly through the world around you, and sometimes even louder inside you. Historians, philosophers, scientists, they've all argued about what this code really is. Some call it mathematics. Some call it divine proportion. Others call it nothing at all, just the natural outcome of physical laws doing what they do. But maybe that's the trick. The code is not separate from reality. It is reality. It's not painted on top of nature like decoration. It is the shape of nature, the fingerprint of a system that's never finished but always coherent. And now that you've followed it through all these forms, these organisms, these scales, you realize something strange. It was never hidden. It was just overlooked because you weren't trained to see it. Not in school, where patterns are boxed into formulas. Not in cities, where nature is paved over and hurried past. Not in daily life, where your focus is pulled outward, hour after hour, until you forget to ask, why does everything look like this? But it's been there the whole time. In the swirl of your fingerprints, in the fog on your window, in the way your tea leaves settle. You remember the zebra's stripes, the spider's web, the snowflake's arms, all of it part of the same script, one that adapts, repeats, branches, spirals, and folds back in on itself. And if you could read it, really read it, you wouldn't find answers exactly. You'd find more questions. Because nature's code isn't static. It evolves, it mutates. It adapts to new pressures, new shapes, new environments. It doesn't crave perfection. It craves survival, resilience, iteration. It's not carved in stone. It's scrawled in living ink, always fatting, always rewriting. And that's what makes it so alive. You lie back one last time, feeling the world settle around you. Not heavy, not light, just present. The air hums with the memory of wings, waves, webs, and roots. Somewhere nearby, a bird chirps once, like a tiny confirmation. You made it. Through spirals and storms. Through mimicry and molecules. Through chaos and crystal. And here you are. A product of the same code. Not above it, not outside of it, inside it, threaded into it like a stitch in a never-ending tapestry. You are a node in the web, a beat in the rhythm, a spiral in the pattern. So if nature is writing something, you're not just reading it. You're one of the characters.